Welcome back. I'm John A.G. All right, today is not a victory lap, and it is not a funeral either. This is a reality check, because silver has not disappeared. Silver has not lost its history, and silver has not suddenly become useless because the crowd got tired. The real problem is not the metal. The real problem is the mood around the metal, the exhaustion, the noise, the disappointment after the spike. The people who came in looking for a straight line higher and got a violent market instead. Before we go deeper, my YouTube stats show a lot of you watch these videos but still have not subscribed. If this content gives you value, subscribe and drop any comment, even Our John AG, so the algorithm knows this community is still alive. Now, let's get into it. Silver is trading in a range that would have sounded unbelievable not that long ago. Around the low to mid $70 area, people are acting bored. Think about that. A few years ago, $70 silver would have sounded like a headline from another universe. Today, because silver ran to a record high above $120 in January and then came back hard, people look at 70 plus silver and say, nothing is happening. That right there is the issue. Not supply, not demand, not history. The issue is expectation. When a market moves too fast, it trains people to expect fireworks every day. Then, when the fireworks stop, even a historically strong price level feels dead. That is how sentiment works. It does not measure value, it measures emotion. And emotion is one of the most dangerous things in a market like silver. So no, I am not here to tell you silver is finished. I am also not here to tell you silver only goes up. That kind of thinking is what burns people out. Silver can be strong and still correct. Silver can have a serious long-term case and still punish bad timing. Silver can be in a structural deficit and still make late buyers feel foolish for a while. That is the part people do not like. That is the part too many people still miss completely. They want one clean story. They want the metal to either be dead or unstoppable. But markets do not work like that. They breathe, they stretch, they trap, they shake people out. Then they reveal who was chasing a video title and who actually understood what they owned. And that brings us to the real question. If silver is still historically important, still industrially needed, and still being pulled between investment demand and physical supply, why does the community feel so tired? Because the community has been overdosed on predictions. Every week there is a new dramatic number. $30, $50, $70, $100, $200, collapse, squeeze, reset, endgame. And after enough of that, even real information starts to feel like noise. People stop listening because the volume has been turned up too high for too long. I understand that fatigue. I talk about silver because there is a lot to talk about. COMEX, London liquidity, industrial demand, retail premiums, ETFs, coin sales, recycling, mining supply, solar demand, monetary fear, inflation psychology. But if every conversation turns into the end of the world or the trade of a lifetime, eventually people tune out. And that is dangerous, because the moment people tune out is often the moment they stop learning. Let's separate the hype from the structure. Silver reached a record level around $121 in January 2026, and by late April, market references placed it back near the $73 zone. That is not a tiny wiggle. That is a major emotional reset. A move like that can create believers on the way up and regret on the way down. But a price falling from an extreme does not automatically mean the thesis is dead. It can mean the market got ahead of itself. It can mean leverage was too hot. It can mean short-term buyers were crowded. It can mean liquidity improved. It can mean holders finally took profits after waiting years for a real move. And yes, some people sold. Of course they did. There were people who sat through years of frustration and told themselves, if this thing ever gets moving, I am out. When the price finally gave them a chance, they did not ask about long-term industrial deficits. They hit the exit. Can you blame them? Some held through disappointment for years. Some watched every promise fail. Some heard, this is the moment, so many times that when the moment finally came, they did not feel excitement. They felt relief. That is investor psychology. Not clean, not logical, very human. But here is where the analysis matters. Silver is not just a chart on a screen. It is also a physical market, an industrial input, a monetary metal, and for many people, a form of private savings outside the usual financial system. That does not make it risk-free. That does not make every price a good entry. But it does mean the conversation cannot be reduced to views are down, so silver is dead. Views are not fundamentals. Comments are not mine supply. Frustration is not a balance sheet. The Silver Institute and Metals Focus have pointed to another deficit year for silver in 2026, with the market expected to remain in structural deficit for a sixth straight year. Reuters reported that inventories have already been drawn down heavily since 2021, while the projected 2026 deficit widened versus 2025. That matters, but it still does not guarantee tomorrow's price. And this is where people get trapped. They hear deficit and expect an immediate explosion. But deficits can exist while prices consolidate. Inventories can cushion stress for a while. Recycling can respond to high prices. Industrial users can thrift. Solar manufacturers can reduce silver use per unit. Investment demand can surge, then cool. The market is not a cartoon, it is a system. That system is strong enough to matter and complicated enough to humble anyone who oversimplifies it. So when someone says, silver is boring now, my response is, compared to what? Compared to a parabolic January? Yes. Compared to the last 20 years of silver history? Absolutely not. A metal sitting around the 70s after a violent reset is not boring. It is a market trying to decide what the new normal actually is. That is the key. We may not be looking at a dead market. We may be looking at a market digesting a shock. And digestion is uncomfortable. It feels slow. It feels uncertain. It does not feed the algorithm. It does not give you a clean thumbnail. It does not give you that instant emotional hit. But it is often where serious markets rebuild. Now, let me be clear. $70 is not automatically the floor. Nobody can honestly promise that. If someone tells you a price level cannot break, be careful. Markets love humiliating certainty. Silver can fall below areas people swear are unbreakable. It can also recover faster than people expect. Both things can be true. That is why I do not like treating silver as a short-term dopamine machine. If you bought it only because you thought it would double by next Friday, then yes, this market can feel brutal. But if you understand silver as physical wealth, insurance, optionality, and long-term exposure to a metal with industrial and monetary demand, then the day-to-day noise becomes easier to process. Not easy, easier, and there is a difference. The long-term silver mindset is not about pretending price does not matter. Price matters. Entry matters. Liquidity matters. Personal finances matter. Cash reserves matter. If you need rent money, emergency money, or debt money, tying all of that into a volatile metal is not strength. That is pressure. And pressure makes weak decisions. But the silver stacking mindset, when done responsibly, is about building ounces over time without letting every headline control your emotions. Ounces do not remove risk. They remove some dependency. That is the point. You are holding something real, outside a brokerage app, outside a bank promise, outside a purely digital claim. That idea has survived longer than most systems people once believed were permanent. And that is why I push back against the silver is dead mood. Dead assets do not create this much debate. Dead assets do not cause emotional arguments. Dead assets do not have people checking inventories, premiums, futures positioning, ETF flows, industrial demand, and retail sentiment every single week. If nobody cared, there would be silence. Instead, we have noise. Too much noise maybe, but still noise. Noise means attention. Fatigue means expectations were too high. Disappointment means people had a target in their head and reality did not meet it fast enough. So let me ask you this. Are you tired of silver itself, or are you tired of the way people talk about silver? That is an important distinction. Because if you are tired of hype, I agree with you. If you are tired of fake certainty, I agree with you. If you are tired of every pullback being called manipulation and every rally being called the final squeeze, I understand. But if you are tired of the metal because it stopped entertaining you for a few weeks, then maybe the issue is not silver. Maybe the issue is the time frame. And this is where successful people in this community need to speak up. If you have built wealth slowly, if you have learned patience, if you have made mistakes and recovered, share that in the comments. People need to hear from viewers who are not just chasing hype, but actually thinking long term. Because new buyers are watching. Some bought near the top. Some are embarrassed. Some are angry. Some are wondering whether they made the worst decision at the worst time. And those people do not need fantasy. They need perspective. Perspective says, yes, buying into a vertical spike can hurt. Perspective also says, one bad entry does not mean the entire asset class is fake. Perspective says, manage risk, slow down, learn the market, and stop letting panic write your strategy. The strongest silver community is not the loudest one. It is the one that can survive both rallies and corrections without losing its mind. Now, there is another uncomfortable point. Content creators, including me, have to be careful. When a market is hot, it is easy to feed the excitement. It is easy to react to big predictions. It is easy to stack dramatic titles on top of dramatic charts. But if the goal is actually to help people, then the conversation has to include risk, patience, and uncertainty. That does not kill excitement. It makes excitement more useful. Because silver still has a story. Industrial demand still matters. Monetary distrust still matters. Government debt still matters. Currency purchasing power still matters. Physical ownership still matters. The difference is that none of those things require you to become reckless. A serious thesis does not need panic. A serious market does not need daily hysteria. A serious investor does not need permission from a comment section. And yet, the comment section does matter for community. So I want to know, have you stayed patient through this silver pullback, or did the January spike and crash change how you look at the metal? Comment honestly, because that conversation is more useful than another empty price target. Here is my bottom line. Silver is not dead. The problem is that a lot of people are emotionally tired. They are tired of waiting, tired of hype, tired of volatility, tired of being told the next move will change everything. That fatigue is real, but fatigue is not the same as failure. The market is corrected, the community is cooled, the excitement has been tested. Good. That is how weak narratives get stripped away. What remains is the real question. Do you understand why you own silver, or were you only borrowing someone else's excitement? If you own it as a quick trade, then treat it like a trade. Have a plan. Respect risk. Do not marry a position. But if you own physical silver as long-term savings, then stop measuring the entire journey by one violent month. A market that can run too far can also correct too far. A market that scares late buyers can still reward disciplined holders. And a community that gets tired can still come back stronger if it gets more honest. That is what I want here. Less fantasy, more discipline, less screaming, more structure, less panic, more patience. Silver does not need us to worship it. It needs us to understand it. And if this channel helps you do that, subscribe, stay with the updates, and leave a comment so I know where this community really stands. The metal is still here. The question is whether your conviction was ever real, or whether it was only borrowed from the last headline.